What I want to tell you guys is that love bombing, just as Kian said, is a strategy that someone uses. And a strategy where at the start, it more often than, later on in a relationship, it happens right at the start. And this is something important to be recognized, that it doesn't necessarily happen later on when you've actually been able to evaluate the dynamic of the relationship well enough. It happens at the start when you haven't had the time to be able to evaluate the dynamic of the person or the relationship at the start. And at this point, the person comes in vomiting all of this, like, as it says, the word love, which comes in the form of love, affection. More importantly, it comes in terms of big signs or big actions of commitment, affection, of value, of validation, more than anything. And so when this person comes in with these big signs of all of this stuff, their intention we'll talk about in a second, but it is a strategy ultimately that they're using to rope somebody else into ultimately receiving, as we talked about, or taking whatever the love or the big signs of the affection that's coming their way. Now, the other part of what happens is that you have a person who's willing to receive these big signs, these big actions, and who's willing to count on them. So Adriana said at the end there, she said that this person makes the other person dependent on them for this source of love and affection and validation. But the other person is also ready to be dependent on an external source for that sake of love and validation and connection. Did that make sense to you guys? That the first source is ready to manipulate, but the second source is ready to be, I don't want to say they're ready to be manipulated, but they're ready to be dependent on someone else for that strong source of like love, validation, connection, for the strong sense of creating their own identity based around this love. Now, the interesting thing about when you look at love bombing now, and you look at the two elements that come in there, the first piece is also where someone is really wounded, and therefore they're creating this strategy. So we talked about narcissism last week. I don't know if you guys got to watch the videos there, but for those of you who missed like most of those pieces, narcissism is an element where someone is really wounded themselves and so creates manipulative strategies to create a false sense of superiority. Love bombing is a sort of extension of that, where someone may not appear to be narcissistic, where they may not be necessarily, manipulative to make you feel shame for your mistakes, for your value, your worth, etc., and the push and the pull. However, with love bombing, this person is using the strategy for a very similar intention. And the strategy of manipulating someone with huge signs of affection, with huge signs of love, with huge signs of maybe even commitment, like saying, let's move in the first week. Hey, I really want you to meet my parents after a few days. The reason that person's doing it is because it gives them a sense of control. It gives them a false sense of safety within feeling like I can control this relationship now because I have this other person who needs me. As we said before, this other person now feels like, oh shit, I need to keep going back to this person for that sense of like love or validation, etc. Now, something really interesting that happens with love bombing is that when this person is doing it, and I want to make clear to everybody that no one consciously is trying to fuck up or manipulate someone. They are unconsciously doing it because they're like a lifelong worth of like coping mechanisms and manipulative patterns that they've learned in order to survive with their own wounds. Why this is important is because there's been so many times when we've had this conversation, and I've talked to people where they believe that narcissists are these amazing people and they need to be pulled down because they're like seeing so much success and seeing so much value, etc. Truth is, they are fucking hurting inside more than you know. So the people who are also producing and doing this love bombing are also people who are very insecure. They're not sure that they can get love by just continuing in a regular, safe, steady like manner or format in a relationship. And so they have to jump in guns blazing right at the start, show you all their cards and be like, hey, this is the best of me that I've got. And who do they seek? They seek the people who are at very vulnerable moments in their lives, people who may not even normally like be someone who may fall for a love bombing, but who may be at a very vulnerable moment, or maybe really hurting from their abandonment and rejection wounds. And so when this love bombing comes in at the start, this person, believe it or not, at the start might even be a little suspicious. be like, isn't this a little quick? Isn't this a little fast? Like this person's like jumping to love me. Sometimes we can just jump in both feet and say like, fuck, this is amazing. Like, I love this. Like, I feel so good. This person makes me feel like, the most special person in the world. I wanted to put out a post the other day about how we're all just one love bomb away from changing our display pictures to have us and our partners in there. And the reason why I said it is because I've had so many clients in the past who, like, one session, they'll tell me, oh my God, I don't know where I can find love. And then literally in a week, they'll change their DP to have them and somebody else in there. I'm like, how did that happen so fast? And next, they're planning their like future somewhat engagements or like, where they're going to go on worldwide holiday trips. Next thing 2 weeks later, that relationship has ended and their abandonment wounds come triggered so much faster. So the lesson here for us, especially on both parts, is to recognize that one end, the love bombing happens because of this person wanting to manipulate to protect themselves from the wounds. But on the other end, that we are unconsciously abandoning ourselves, not to fall for their tricks, but we're abandoning ourselves and depending on that source of love outside more than we are considering what is the source of love that I have on the inside. Let me ask you another question. We've all fallen for this. So there's in this group, everything is safe, everything is open, and we're encouraged to be vulnerable. So I myself you'll hear me sharing all of the stories of my past in here. But when we're at moments that, let me first say, how many of us have experienced somebody trying to love bomb us in our lives? Let's raise our hands. We've been there. There's almost everybody in this group, right? Now, when we've gone through with it and when we chose to be in that relationship, I want to ask you, how many of us were in places where we felt kind of lonely, where we felt we really wanted someone or companionship, or we just needed to feel better by being around someone? Let's be honest and just, appreciate it to ourselves. That's every single one of us. So as you can see, we are more likely, and this I want you guys to remember, and if you want to write this down wherever you are, this is really important. We're more likely to abandon ourselves when we're not truly showing up for ourselves. I'm going to repeat that again. We're more likely to abandon ourselves when we're not truly showing up for ourselves, which means we're more likely to put ourselves in compromising situations or relationships when we're not prioritizing our own inner work, our own healing, discipline, structure in our life, learning to show up for our own inner child. When we're not doing these things, we are more likely to abandon ourselves, which means we are more likely to become bait to said love bombing. Now, like I said, for some people at the start, when they experience or they get in a relationship with like a love bomber, or they approach that connection, at the start, that person who's love bombing may still seem a little suspicious to this other person, right? Because this other person's like, I've never had a relationship like this. This is a little skeptical. Like, why are we jumping in so soon? But something really interesting happens when they start to question this, and they're like, I don't know, isn't this a little fast? You will find more often than not, that person who's doing the love bombing will use possibly like a threat, or will suddenly pull back all their resources to suddenly say like, okay, well, then I guess, you don't deserve me, or we don't need to be together, or, I'm better off somewhere else, or anything like that, which unconsciously is another manipulation. But what it does, more importantly, is it triggers the abandonment wound so heavy in the other person. And the person who self-abandons is suddenly thinking to themselves, holy shit, am I going to give up something amazing here? Am I going to be on my own or alone all over again? Like, I have someone who says they love me, who says they want to be with me. I'm going to fucking meet their parent like next week. Am I literally just going to fucking give this up? Or like, am I literally sabotaging this? Holy fuck, no. And because that wound gets triggered, we go back and we fall into that trap. And then that's how the enmeshment happens. That's how the trauma bonding happens, when we continue with both the back and the forth of this. Hey, and welcome to the Inner Yats YouTube page. If you like our content, make sure you click the like and the subscribe button so that you get more of these amazing videos that keep coming your way.